They say that when the Inquisition comes for you, the world does not end in fire or the thunder of orbital bombardment. It ends in silence, the kind that settles over a room, a heartbeat before a storm breaks, the kind that knows your name before you even speak it. I remember standing beneath the failing lumen strips of a forgotten hab block, the stale smell of chem smog in my lungs, when the robed figures stepped from the shadows. Their rosarious pendants glowed faintly, not with warmth, but with verdict. I had not run. Where could one run from the God Emperor's most absolute hand? The whispers say innocence means nothing. Guilt is a formality. The only truth is whether your existence still serves the Imperium or whether it must be erased to protect it. And in that moment, as their masked visors fixed upon me, I understood a terrible question was coming. Trial or execution? If you walk willingly into the dark corners of the Imperium, if these forbidden tales stir your curiosity or dread, stay with us. Share this chronicle, lend strength to its telling, and subscribe so you never miss the next shadow the Imperium tries to hide. The night I was taken began without ceremony, without warning, without even the subtle sense of dread that sometimes coils in the gut before disaster strikes. It was an ordinary evening, if such a thing exists in the underhive sprawl of Urdesh's Rotwater district. The air hung heavy with the chemical stench rising from distant manufactorum stacks, and corrosive mist clung to the rusted metal walkways as though the city exhaled poison with every breath. My shift had ended hours earlier, but I lingered at the old hab passage near Block 17, watching the dim lumen strips flicker in lazy rhythms. Their pale glow cast long shadows that swayed whenever a gust of wind wandered through the stairwell, stirring the dust like restless spirits. I remember thinking briefly that I should go home, that I should return to my cot, to the quiet darkness of my habitation cell with its cracked walls and single-dented water dispenser. But my legs did not move. Habit kept me rooted to the same railing I always leaned on after work, the one spot where the noise thinned enough that I could hear my own thoughts. The murmur of distant pipes, the groaning churn of ancient machinery, the occasional shout drifting upward from the sump-level markets, all of it blurred into a dull hum. Then the hum died. At first I thought it was simply a power interruption, another blackout sweeping through the district like a tide of forgotten maintenance. But the silence that replaced it was different, deeper, heavier, as though the city itself had exhaled and then refused to inhale again. I straightened, instinct prickling along my arms. My eyes searched the shadows, the steam, the dim corridors branching away like arteries from a diseased heart. Nothing moved, nothing breathed. The quiet pressed closer, a suffocating blanket settling over my shoulders. I should have run, but by the time the thought formed, they were already behind me. The first sign was the faint, almost imperceptible hiss of a rebreather intake. Then came the sound of boots, not clumsy or hurried, but measured, precise, each step landing with the weight of authority. I turned slowly. Something deep inside me insisted that any sudden movement would be mistaken for resistance. 3 figures stood in the half-light, their presence swallowing what little illumination the lumen strips still offered. They wore layered robes of storm grey, each fold edged with purity seals that fluttered softly despite the stillness of the air. Their faces were hidden behind black masks fitted with narrow vertical visors, each visor glowing faintly with pale blue light. Inquisitorial masks. My breath stalled. Not arbitrators, not enforcers, not local authorities. The Inquisition. The robed figure at the center stepped forward, the others moving in perfect synchronization with him. His rosarious pendant swayed slightly, casting a shimmering reflection against the cracked wall beside me. No words were spoken, none needed to be. The silence between us felt alive, as though even the shadows feared to intrude. "Initiate orbital transit protocol," the central figure said at last. His voice filtered through the vox grill in his mask. The tone was devoid of emotion, carved from something colder than steel. He did not look at me when he said it. He did not need to. My hands instinctively rose. I haven't done anything," I whispered. He tilted his head in the slightest of motions, an animal studying an unfamiliar sound. "Everyone says that," he replied. I felt gloved hands grip my arms from behind. I hadn't heard the 4th figure arrive. His presence came with the subtle brush of a weapon holstered at his hip, something compact, something final. They bound my wrists with clamps that tightened until the metal bit into my skin, the cold setting in like a second pulse. "You are being transferred for evaluation," the central figure continued. "You will not resist. I don't even know why." "That," he interrupted, "is irrelevant." The clamps pulled tight, locking. My arms were forced behind me, and a hood of coarse fabric was dropped over my head, plunging me into darkness. I stumbled as they propelled me forward, boots scuffing against the grated walkway. Every sound felt magnified now, the rasp of breath inside the hood, the clang of metal underfoot, the precise steps of the inquisitorial agents moving like a single organism. They guided me down several levels, the air growing colder with each descent. Occasionally I heard distant shouting from the market stalls or the high whine of industrial loaders shifting crates of scrap and synth food packs, yet no one tried to intervene. No one dared to acknowledge what they were seeing. For the common citizen of the Imperium, the sight of the wand Inquisition was a terror so absolute that survival instinct demanded ignorance. Eyes turned away, conversations ceased, even the air seemed to recoil. We reached a landing zone where the wind howled through a wide metal aperture. The shriek of a shuttle's engines roared to life, sending vibrations through the ground that rattled my bones. A firm hand pressed against my back. "Board," the central figure ordered. I obeyed. Inside the shuttle, the sounds from the hive faded behind sealed doors. The hood was removed, and I blinked hard as my eyes adjusted to the harsh white glow of lumen panels. The interior was stark, lined with restraint harnesses, and Auspex units mounted like silent watchers. A servitor, its limbs replaced with metallic restraints, hovered near the door, awaiting orders. I was strapped into a harness, the metal pressed against my ribs, restricting movement until my breathing felt shallow. The Inquisitors took their seats opposite me, their masks expressionless, their bodies motionless. The shuttle lifted. The ascent pressed me back into the harness, the vibration rippling through my bones. Through the small, reinforced viewport beside me, the sprawl of Urdesh fell away, a labyrinth of failing lights, crooked structures, and exhaust plumes rising like prayers lost in the void. The city shrank to a speck, then to nothing. Silence claimed the cabin once more. For a long time, no one spoke. The only sound was the steady hum of the shuttle's engines and the faint whisper of my own heartbeat. The Inquisitors sat as still as statues, as though carved directly from the will of the Emperor himself. I searched their visors for something human, a flicker of curiosity, impatience. Anything but their masks were monoliths. Time stretched, warped by fear and uncertainty. Minutes felt like hours. My thoughts raced in circles, seeking some memory, some act, some misstep that might explain why I had been taken. Had I worked beside a heretic without knowing it? Had I touched something unclean during my shifts? Had someone spoken my name in the wrong context? The possibilities multiplied like a swarm of insects. "State your designation," the central figure finally said. He leaned forward just slightly, enough to make the faint glow of his visor feel like a blade pressed to my throat. "Jalen Vore," I answered. My voice sounded small, thin, unfamiliar. "Occupation? Loading technician for Manufactorum 9B. Time in service? 14 years. He tilted his head. "No commendations, no disciplinary records, no known associates under investigation." I swallowed. "Then why am I—" He cut me off. Silence. The word struck like a fist. I felt it reverberate through my entire being. Another Inquisitor, the one on the left, produced a data slate. He tapped a sequence of commands, and the slate projected a faint holographic display. I strained to see the image, but he angled it just out of view. "His proximity records align with the targeted window," the second Inquisitor murmured. "Multiple routes of possibility remain." "Possibility is sufficient for seizure," the central figure replied. "His evaluation will determine viability." Viability. The way he said it made my skin crawl. The shuttle trembled slightly as it docked with a larger vessel. The overhead panels dimmed. A mechanical hiss filled the cabin as the airlock cycled open. Cold air swept in, cold like the air of a grave. I was unstrapped, roughly, and guided through the doorway into a corridor lined with steel walls and votive lights. Each flame flickered beneath its protective casing, casting shadows that danced like restless spirits. A procession of servo skulls floated overhead, their crimson lenses scanning me as I walked beneath them. The whir of their engines echoed off the metal, each sound a reminder that nothing here was alive without purpose. We moved deeper into the ship, into its bowels. The scent changed. Incense drifted through the recycled air, mingled with the sterile tang of antiseptic and the faint metallic odor of blood long scrubbed from the decking. The corridor widened into an antechamber where two more robed figures awaited us, interrogators. Their robes bore additional sigils, intricate symbols representing clearance levels far beyond my comprehension. They regarded me with the detached interest of scholars observing a specimen. "Transfer complete," the central figure said. "Prisoner is stable." "Stable," the interrogators approached. One extended a hand and placed it lightly on my forehead. A jolt surged through me, psychic static, brief but sharp, as though a cold finger had pressed into my skull, searching. He withdrew his hand. "He will endure," the interrogator said. "For now," the other added. I was pushed through a second door, this one heavy and constructed with reinforced locking bars thicker than my wrist. It clanged shut behind me. The chamber beyond was dimly lit, a single lumen globe casting pale circles across the metal floor. Restraints lined the walls. A table of surgical instruments gleamed in the corner. A restraining chair sat at the center, its metal arms open and waiting. I staggered back. "No," I whispered. "Please listen to me. I don't know why I'm here. I haven't done anything. If you just tell me what this is about, I can explain." A hand gripped my shoulder, firm and unyielding. "You are not here to explain," the interrogator said, his voice smooth and cold. "You are here to be understood." I was forced into the chair. The restraints snapped shut around my wrists and ankles. A metal band lowered over my brow, locking into place with an audible click. I tried to steady my breathing, but each inhale felt too shallow, too sharp. The room smelled of old fear, of incense burned to mask the scent of sweat and panic. The interrogator circled me slowly. "You were seized because your existence intersects with a matter far greater than your comprehension," he said. "You may be innocent, you may be guilty, you may be useful. The Emperor will decide." He leaned close. "And the Emperor speaks through us." A cold tool touched the side of my neck. I flinched as it inserted something beneath the skin, a needle or a probe, or some unholy amalgamation of both. My vision blurred. The room darkened. The interrogator whispered, "Your trial begins now," and the world folded into silence once more. The first thing I felt was the weight, not physical, but something far more intrusive, a heaviness that pressed not upon my limbs but inside my skull, as if unseen hands were prying apart the seams of my thoughts. The darkness I'd fallen into did not lift completely. Instead, it thinned, peeling away in frail, translucent layers. A muffled hum rose behind my ears, steady and pulsing, like the distant heartbeat of a machine too large to comprehend. I opened my eyes. I was still strapped to the restraining chair. The cold metal cradled my body with clinical indifference, its unyielding surfaces pressing into the bones beneath my skin. The restraints dug deeper with every minor tremor, forming crescents of pain against my wrists. My breath fogged faintly in the chill air. The lumen globe overhead flickered, casting the chamber in a wavering halo of pale illumination. Shadows stretched and contracted across the walls like living things attempting to break free. Someone was breathing near me, soft, measured, unhurried. A presence hovered at the edge of my vision. "You emerged sooner than expected," a voice said. It belonged to the interrogator who had touched my mind before, the one whose psychic imprint still lingered behind my eyes. He stepped into the light with fluid grace, his hooded robes draping over him like the folds of a funeral shroud. His mask was absent now. I could see his face. His features were sharp, defined, almost delicate, but his eyes carried the cold luminosity of someone who had long abandoned mortal hesitation. "How long was I unconscious?" I asked. My voice rasped, roughened by dryness and fear. "Long enough," he replied. "The sedative required time to integrate with the cognitive matrix we've placed within you." I froze. The words were not unfamiliar: cognitive matrix, integration, sedative, but hearing them applied to myself felt like listening to a mortician quietly discuss measurements for a coffin. Something was inside me now, something foreign. The interrogator seemed to sense my realization. He leaned closer, his expression unreadable. "Every subject brought before us undergoes preliminary measures," he said. "We must ensure your mind can withstand what is to come. Some strain, some fracture, some burn out entirely." His tone did not imply sympathy or regret, only acknowledgement. He walked behind me, his footsteps echoing faintly against the floor. Metal clattered softly as he selected instruments from the table. I attempted to turn my head, but the restraint across my brow held me motionless. A faint prick touched the back of my neck, cold at first, then searing. A shiver tore down my spine, my muscles twitching involuntarily. What was that? A cortical awakenator. It stimulates neural responsiveness while suppressing involuntary shock reactions. "We cannot have you dying mid-procedure. Not yet." He came around again, holding a slender device shaped like a branching fork. Its prongs glowed with a pale green light that pulsed in rhythmic cycles. I felt each pulse in my teeth. "You remain under the Emperor's scrutiny," he continued. "Your memories, actions, associations, they are threads. We must trace them." "I told you," I whispered. "I haven't done anything." His gaze sharpened, as if he were leaning over the edge of a deep chasm and seeing something far below. "Innocence is not determined by action alone," he said. "Sometimes it is proximity, sometimes it is ignorance, sometimes it is mere bad luck." He pressed the device against the side of my head. Agony tore through me. Not the sharp pain of a blade, nor the dull ache of an injury. This was something deeper, a wrenching force that reached inside my skull and pulled. My vision split into fractured lines of color. Sounds compressed into warped echoes. Memories flickered like torn pages in a storm. I gasped, but the breath caught in my chest. The restraints held me in place as the device pressed harder. I saw flashes my workstation at the manufactorum. The endless conveyor belts carrying half-assembled shell casings and promethium tanks. The managers pacing with data slates in their gloved hands. The other workers with their gaunt cheeks and hollow eyes. Then I saw the corridor outside my hab unit, the cracked tiles, the humming air vents. A face flashed. A figure walking past me several nights ago, cloaked in worn fabric, moving with deliberate steps. "Stop," I managed to choke out. "Please." The interrogator withdrew the device. My body sagged forward as far as the restraints allowed, sweat dripping down my temples. Every muscle trembled. The ringing in my ears drowned out all other sound for several seconds. He watched me with clinical interest. "You responded within measurable tolerance. Promising. Promising." The word felt obscene. He tapped something on a nearby console. The lights dimmed further, replaced by the pale glow of a hollow emitter descending from the ceiling. It projected a circular array of symbols, each rotating slowly like gears of an unseen machine. The symbols were unfamiliar cryptic sigils that seemed to shift when I tried to focus on them. "This chamber," he said, "is designed to extract truth in its purest form, not simply words, truth at its root. Truth that hides beneath layers of mundane memory, beneath the dust of daily existence." He stepped behind me again. I heard him adjusting the restraints. "You have crossed paths with someone of interest to us." "I don't know anyone," I said, my voice shaking. "I don't know anything." "Perhaps not consciously," he replied, "but the subconscious registers much. You will show us." The restraining chair tilted back, lifting me into a reclined position. The holo array hovered above me like a spectral halo. The sigils brightened, casting faint patterns across my face. The interrogator placed his hand lightly against my temple. Cold surged through me. Shapes formed within the light, coalescing from swirling fragments, corridors, streets, crowds, the underhive's tangle of rust and decay. Scenes from my memory, reconstructed in spectral fragments. I saw myself walking through the market, saw the hunched form of an elderly trader selling cracked water flasks, saw distant silhouettes weaving through plumes of steam. The interrogator's voice became a whisper behind my ear. "Search." The scenes shifted. My pace changed. The memory fast-forwarded without my consent, dragging me along. I felt the rush of wind against my skin, the screech of machinery in the distance, the rumble of transport haulers moving through narrow streets, and then the scene froze. A figure stood in the center of the projection, cloaked, hooded, unremarkable in every way except for the faint metallic glint beneath the edge of their sleeve. A glint I had not noticed at the time, a glint, interrogator now magnified, an augmetic implant. The interrogator leaned over me. You passed this individual near the Manufactorum entrance 3 weeks ago. Identify them. I don't know who that is. He narrowed the projection's focus, zooming in on the figure's hand. The faint imprint of a symbol was carved into the prosthetic surface, something angular, composed of overlapping lines. I didn't recognize it. You saw this, the interrogator said. You did not register it, but your eyes captured it. Your subconscious retained it. Now you will interpret it. The sigil flared. Pain shot through me as the memory's resolution sharpened. My mind recoiled, but the restraints held me still. The interrogator's psychic presence pressed deeper. I screamed. For a moment, the chamber dissolved. The restraints vanished. The interrogator's voice distorted into a distant echo. I felt myself falling into a tunnel of flickering images, memories rearranged, recolored, distorted. A hidden door beneath the Manufactorum, a figure slipping inside, the smell of ozone and burnt metal, a faint glow from a device held in someone's hand, a whisper inaudible but heavy with intent. My consciousness snapped back like a taut wire. The chamber returned. My breath came in ragged, uneven gasps. The interrogator withdrew his hand, exhaling softly. You are connected, he said, indirectly, but connected. I'm just a loading technician, I whispered. Why would anyone? We do not choose the paths that bind us, he interrupted. Chance is often the Emperor's quiet hand. He removed a vial from his robe, filled with a thick golden liquid that swirled like living amber. He held it up to the light. You will drink this. No, he tilted his head. It was not a request. He pried my jaw open with practiced precision. The liquid slid down my throat with unnatural warmth, settling in my stomach like molten metal. It spread upward, threading through my veins, burning, then cooling, then burning again. What is it? An alchemical truth elixir, refined through ancient methods, he replied. It will enhance mental clarity while eliminating resistance. Side effects include disorientation, auditory hallucination, and temporary dissolution of ego. My pulse hammered. Do not fight it, he said. You will only prolong the suffering. The world blurred at the edges. Sounds thickened. Light smudged into streaks. The chamber swayed like a vessel caught in storm tides. My limbs grew numb, then overly sensitive, then numb again. The holo array brightened. Images swirled, faces I had seen, faces I had forgotten, faces I had passed without thought. Dozens, hundreds. Every passerby from every corridor, every day of my life. I felt my identity fray. Who else have you crossed paths with? The interrogator murmured. The questions spiraled through my mind. I tried to answer, but as I reached for memories, they slipped through my grasp, melting into the liquid haze the elixir forced upon me. Another figure appeared in the projection, a tall man with a scar across his jaw, wearing worn industrial gear. He spoke to a group of workers near the sump-level elevators. His voice was distant, muted, but his gestures were sharp. I recognized him vaguely. A foreman, perhaps, or someone who passed by the docks occasionally. I wasn't certain. He disseminated forbidden material, the interrogator said. Pamphlets, chants, heretical codices. Did you see any in his possession? I don't remember, I whispered. You must. He pressed his fingers against my temple again. The world ruptured into splinters. I saw the foreman speaking to a worker. A small object changed hands, thin, rectangular, a data slate. Then, in another memory, I saw him descending the elevator alone, clutching something hidden behind his back. Did he give you anything? The interrogator demanded. No. Did you see him give anything to others? I don't know. Search again. Pain returned less intense but more invasive, like cold hooks dragging through tissue. My thoughts warped under the onslaught. Memories collided, merging into incoherent shapes. Suddenly, the scene froze again. The cloaked figure with the augmetic implant stood beside the foreman. They exchanged a brief nod, a single gesture, a single acknowledgement. The interrogator inhaled. So, the threads intersect. He released me. The restraints loosened slightly, not enough for escape, but enough to shift my weight. My body sagged, my limbs trembling uncontrollably. "You have provided enough for today," the interrogator said. "Further extraction will resume once your neural pathways stabilize." He stepped away, retrieving a syringe filled with a clear fluid. He injected it into my arm. Warmth spread through me, numbing the pain, dulling the noise that filled my skull. "You will rest now," he murmured. "Tomorrow, we will go deeper." The lumen globe dimmed, leaving the chamber in half darkness. The door hissed open. 2 acolytes entered, unstrapped me, and lifted me by the arms. My legs refused to support me. My head lolled forward as they dragged me down a corridor lined with cells. Each cell contained a single slab, a single lumen strip, and a single occupant or the remnants of one. Some figures twitched, some murmured to themselves, some lay motionless, staring at nothing. My cell was small, cold, and damp. They dropped me onto the slab with little ceremony and sealed the door behind them. Darkness settled like a shroud. My thoughts drifted, fragmented. The interrogator's voice echoed within my mind, a lingering parasite. "Tomorrow, we will go deeper." I closed my eyes. I prayed, not for escape, not for mercy, but simply for the strength to survive whatever truth they intended to carve from me next. For a long time, I drifted on the edge of consciousness, suspended between waking and dreaming, between memory and oblivion. The cell's darkness clung to my skin like something alive, dense and suffocating, its silence broken only by the slow drip of condensation that echoed through the stone like distant footsteps. When I finally stirred, the ache that had taken root in my bones had grown into something deeper, something that throbbed with every shallow breath. The elixir lingered in my veins like a ghostly frost. My limbs felt foreign. My thoughts came in fractured waves. A clatter outside my door snapped me from my lethargy. Metal locks disengaged, gears ground. The heavy slab of the cell door slid open with a sound like a guillotine being raised. Light streamed in dim, sickly, yet blinding after the hours I'd spent in shadow. 2 acolytes entered, their faces concealed behind expressionless masks of steel. Neither spoke. They simply seized me by the arms and dragged me into the corridor. My legs resisted, not intentionally. They simply refused to function properly. Every step felt like wading through thick mud, my joints protesting with dull fire. The acolytes did not slow. They hauled me forward with the efficient indifference of servitors servicing machinery. I was taken deeper into the complex. The halls here were narrower, built of stone older than the city above us, carved by hands that might not have survived the age of strife. Torch sconces lined the walls, casting wavering amber light that danced across ritual markings etched into the stone. Some of the sigils were familiar purity symbols, warding runes, while others were more esoteric, symbols I had never seen, their shapes unsettling, their meaning unknowable. We descended a spiral staircase. The air grew thicker, warmer, laced with a metallic tang that reminded me faintly of burnt offering incense. The deeper we went, the louder a low, rhythmic thudding became, as though a colossal heartbeat pulsed beneath the stone. Eventually I was brought into a large chamber. It was circular, cavernous, and constructed in tiers that descended toward a central pit. The pit itself was filled with machines, huge ones looming silhouettes of iron, chain, piston, and blade, arranged around a platform of obsidian slabs. The glow from thermal lamps cast everything in orange-gold hues that flickered like firelight. Standing near the center of the room were robed figures, inquisitorial acolytes, scribes, and adepts. A few held data slates. Others whispered prayers under their breaths as they prepared instruments of interrogation and ritual examination. None looked at me, yet all seemed aware of my presence. The interrogator stood before the central platform, his hands clasped behind his back. He turned when I approached. "Good," he said, as though speaking to a student who had finally arrived for lessons they never wished to learn. "You are awake, and still functional." I Didn't reply. I didn't have the strength. Silence fell upon the chamber, broken only by the metallic heartbeat of the machines. He approached, his robes trailing across the stone. "In the eyes of the Inquisition," he began, "truth is not merely uncovered, it is forged." He gestured toward the platform, "and forging requires fire." The acolytes hoisted me onto the slab, securing metal clasps around my ankles and wrists. The cold bite of the restraints shocked a tremor through my body. I tried to swallow, but my throat was too dry. The interrogator circled me. "You have already given us fragments," he said, "glimmers of connection. But we require more than fragments. We require certainty." I forced my voice to function. "What do you want from me?" "Everything," he replied softly. "Everything you have seen, everything you have heard, everything you have buried. The mind is a labyrinth, and truth likes to hide in the darkest turns." He nodded to one of all. "The acolytes." A device descended from the ceiling, a harness of metal arms and glass tubes, bristling with needles and electrodes. It hung above me like a mechanical predator poised to strike. I stared at it, my heartbeat thundering in my ears. "What is that?" "The mind refiner," he said. "An artifact passed down through several inquisitorial generations. Its purpose is not pain. Pain is incidental. Its purpose is illumination. It tears away the veils of the mind, one memory at a time." The device adjusted its position, aligning its arms with my skull. I felt the first needle press against my temple. Not a puncture, just pressure. Cold, metallic pressure that sank into my nerves. The interrogator raised his hand. "Begin." The machine activated. Searing white light filled my vision. My thoughts unraveled. I screamed not from the pain itself, but from the terror of feeling my consciousness stretched thin, pulled like molten metal being hammered on an anvil. Memories erupted my childhood in the hive's lower quarters. The first day I worked the manufactorum line. The night I struggled to breathe in a smog-clogged dormitory. All of it spilled outward, flooding into the machine's hungry circuits. The interrogator's voice cut through the chaos. "Focus on the night near the manufactorum's lower gate. The cloaked figure, the augmetic arm. Show me." The machine pulsed. The chamber dissolved. I was there again, walking down the oil-stained pathway, the hum of conveyor lifts vibrating through the ground. The night fog curled around my ankles. I recalled thinking of nothing but reaching my hab unit before the curfew sirens wailed. The cloaked figure stepped from the shadows. Time slowed. The machine forced clarity where memory had blurred. Every detail sharpened the precise angle of the figure's head, the faint scratching sound of augmetic fingers brushing the fabric of their cloak, the subtle shimmer of something metallic beneath their sleeve. But there was something else, something I had not noticed before, a faint glow beneath the hood, a pair of eyes, mechanical in their precision, faintly luminous, scanning the area with calculated intent. The interrogator's voice pressed closer. "Good. Now show me where they went next." The memory shifted. The figure moved past me, stepping into a narrow service corridor. They placed a hand against a panel one I had always assumed was inert, but now I saw the faint response glyphs flash beneath their fingertips. The wall slid open just enough for them to slip inside before sealing shut. Hidden access, unauthorized, forbidden. I cried out as the mind refiner forced the memory to loop, magnifying every detail until it burned behind my eyes. "That panel," the interrogator murmured. "Describe it." I don't know. I never noticed." "You did. You simply forgot. The machine retrieves what you discarded." The memory froze on the trisos. Panels, glyphs, symbols, faint, faded, but recognizable. A cog and skull motif with a diagonal fracture through it, a heretic mark. My breath hitched. "That cannot be coincidence," the interrogator said. "The foreman you saw days later, he knew this figure. Their paths intersect, and you stood close enough to witness both." The machine released my mind abruptly. I gasped, my vision swimming, the chamber spinning around me. Sweat soaked my clothes. My heart hammered against my ribs. The interrogator leaned over me. "You are beginning to understand the gravity of your situation." I forced my eyes open. "I'm just a worker. I'm not part of anything." His expression darkened, not with anger, but with something colder. "You misunderstand. You do not need to be part of anything. You merely need to have seen too much." He stood straight, gesturing for the acolytes to prepare another device. This one resembled a metal collar, lined with small conduits. They fastened it around my throat. As it clicked shut, a cold jolt ran down my spine. "The doctrine of iron and ash requires more than memories," he said. "It requires intent." "I didn't do anything," I whispered. "Intent is not always conscious," he replied. "Sometimes it must be extracted." The collar tightened. My breath caught. A wave of cold surged into my skull, threading through my thoughts like icy tendrils seeking hidden truths. Suddenly I heard voices, not external ones, internal ones, whispers, fragments of conversations I'd had over the years, a colleague complaining about ration cutbacks, a supervisor muttering curses about delays, a stranger whispering a warning in the marketplace, a rumor about a hidden cult beneath the manufactorum, each voice layered over the next, forming a chaotic chorus. The collar pulsed, the whispers sharpened. One voice rose above the rest, a memory I had forgotten or had chosen to forget. Late at night, two workers speaking in hushed tones behind a generator stack. "They'll make contact soon. Be careful, the Inquisition watches the lower levels. The one with the augmetic arm will guide us." My blood froze. I had overheard this weeks ago. I hadn't understood its meaning, so I dismissed it, let it slip from conscious thought. The collar throbbed. The interrogator leaned forward. "There," he said softly. "That is what we needed." I didn't know what they meant, I gasped. I thought it was just gossip, just idle talk. "Idle talk can ferment into treachery," he said. "The Imperium has fallen before from careless whispers." I clenched my fists against the restraints. "I swear I didn't." The collar constricted slightly, not enough to crush my throat, but enough to silence me. The interrogator turned to his adepts. "Record everything. We proceed to the next phase." My chest tightened. Next phase. There was more. Always more. The acolytes adjusted the machines, preparing for whatever was coming. The interrogator stepped behind me, his voice low. "You stand at a crossroads," he said. "Unwitting witness to forbidden activity. The Emperor demands vigilance. We demand cooperation." "I've given you everything," I whispered. "No," he replied. "You have given us the surface, but treachery hides in the roots, and we must dig until we find where they end." The machines hummed, the lights dimmed. The interrogator's hand touched the back of my head once more, and I felt myself descending not into memory, but into something deeper, something colder, something that would scrape away the final layers of who I once was. The chamber faded, the restraints vanished, and I stood, in some impossible mental space, facing the shadow of the cloaked figure once more. Only now the shadow turned toward me. It lifted its hood, and beneath the darkness, a pair of mechanical eyes regarded me. Waiting, watching, judging. The interrogator's voice echoed around me like a thunderclap. "Now," he whispered, "we find the truth behind the mask." When I awoke again, the world no longer felt like a place built of stone and metal. It felt instead like a liminal space, a threshold balanced between waking and dreaming. The cell's walls were still there, rough and cold beneath my fingertips, but they seemed distant, as if viewed through a haze of distortion that had not yet lifted. My mind pulsed with the dull ache of overstimulation. The lingering effects of the mind refiner clung to me like the residue of an oil slick, coating every thought with a faint metallic taste. My heartbeat was uneven, my breathing shallow. The drip of condensation in the darkness now sounded like the ticking of a clock, marking the final moments of someone else's life. Eventually, footsteps approached, slow, deliberate, echoing down the hall like a procession of executioners. My door unlocked. The light that spilled through was dimmer than the last time, tinted with a deep amber hue that made the corridor seem older, as though carved in a bygone era, when humanity still remembered hope. Two acolytes waited, but someone else stood behind them, a figure wearing armor, not full power armor, but a lighter form of carapace, reinforced with adamantine plates and purity seals. His helm bore the symbol of the Inquisition, etched like a brand across its brow. He carried himself with the rigid bearing of a soldier, But there was something else beneath that posture, something eerie, subdued, almost hollow. "Rise," he said. My legs trembled as I forced myself upright. The acolytes flanked me. The armored figure stepped back to allow me through the doorway. His steps were silent, far too controlled for someone wrapped in such heavy plating. We moved through corridors I had not seen before. These were older than the others, their walls cracked with age, covered in layers of inscriptions that had faded into near illegibility. The air felt heavier here, as if weighed down by centuries of accumulated judgment. The torches burned brighter, their flames flickering in drafts that smelled faintly of incense and ash. We descended another staircase, steeper, narrower, spiraling so tightly I felt vertigo tugging at the edges of my vision. The armored figure moved with ease, while my foot slipped more than once. The acolytes corrected my balance each time with silent precision. At the bottom lay a massive door, not metal, stone, carved with symbols of purity, warning, and supplication. Chains wrapped its surface, seals hung from its edges. The armored figure extended his gauntleted hand and pressed it against a circular indentation. A deep, resonant hum vibrated through the stone. The chains unlatched with a clatter. The door groaned open. A rush of cold air swept out, smelling of dust, stale incense, and something older, something like the faint trace of despair. Inside was a vast chamber, illuminated only by guttering candles. This place was different from the others. Not a torture chamber, not an interrogation room, something quieter, more sacred, or perhaps more profane. Along the walls were alcoves, and within those alcoves sat figures motionless, kneeling, draped in robes darker than the stone behind them. Their heads bowed, their hands clasped in prayer. Their silence was absolute, not even broken by breath. I stepped closer, squinting through the dim. They were not statues, they were alive, but barely. Their robes bore the symbols of the Inquisition, but stripped of all ornamentation. Their bodies were gaunt, their faces pale, their eyes closed. Some murmured faintly, their lips moving in repetitive, mantra-like patterns. Others simply knelt, unmoving, as if carved into the chamber itself. "What is this place?" I whispered, not expecting an answer. But the armored figure did answer. "The penitent hall," he said, "where those who have broken faith are given purpose." His voice held no emotion. "Their minds were found wanting," he continued, "their loyalty suspect, their deeds contaminated by proximity to heresy. So the Inquisition, in its mercy, afforded them a path to redemption." He gestured to the kneeling figures. "They pray, they watch, they wait. Some for days, some for years, some for the remainder of their miserable existence." "Are they prisoners?" I asked. "They are penitents," he replied. "They offered themselves willingly, or their will was shaped to accept the offer. It matters little. What matters is that they serve a function." He stepped forward, guiding me deeper into the chamber. Candlelight cast long shadows across the stone floor. The penitents did not move. Their stillness was unnerving, as though they were held upright by something other than muscle or devotion. "Why bring me here?" I asked. The armored figure said nothing. Instead, we reached an altar at the far end of the hall. Upon it rested objects. I could not decipher scrolls bound in leather, relics adorned with broken fragments of metal, and a stide, long staff carved from dark wood, its tip encased in a claw-like mechanism. Standing near the altar was the interrogator. His expression was unreadable as he turned toward me. His eyes, illuminated by the candlelight, appeared almost molten, reflecting something too deep to comprehend. "You have reached the threshold," he said, "the place where truth becomes consequence." I swallowed. My throat burned. "What more do you want from me?" "Nothing more," he replied. "What comes next is not extraction, it is revelation." He approached the altar, placing his hands on the claw-tipped staff. "The Inquisition holds many secrets," he said. "Some hidden by necessity, some by tradition, some because their mere existence would unravel the fragile stability of the Imperium." He tapped the staff lightly on the stone floor. A deep vibration resonated through the chamber, and the kneeling figures shuddered as one just once before stilling again, their faces tightening in pained devotion. The interrogator looked at me. There is a path for those whose proximity to heresy has tainted them beyond trust, he said. A path neither execution nor absolution, a path of service stripped of identity. Something cold tightened around my heart. You mean, I'm one of them? Not yet, he said. But you may be, depending on what remains buried inside you. He stepped closer. You stood near the heretic. You overheard traitorous whispers. You witnessed the foreman's secret exchange. You saw the panel that should not have been touched, and you failed to report any of it. I didn't understand. Understanding is irrelevant, he said. Duty is absolute. Shall I tell you what happens to those who fail their duty? I didn't answer. I couldn't. He lifted the staff. At first I thought he intended to strike me with it. Instead, he traced its tip lightly across the floor. The claw glowed faintly, and symbols etched themselves into the stone, forming a spiral of runes that pulsed with a cold blue light. The penitents began to murmur softly, fearfully. A chill swept through the room. This, he said quietly, is the mark of observation. I stared at the glowing runes. What does it do? It opens a door, he said. Not a physical one, a symbolic one, a path through which your fate may be determined. He motioned for the armored figure. Bring him to the center. The acolytes forced me forward until I stood at the heart of the rune circle. The stone beneath my feet vibrated faintly. The interrogator raised the staff. Light coiled around its head like a serpent. Now, he said, we determine your future. A surge of force struck me not physically, but mentally. My vision flickered. The world shifted. I felt myself torn from the chamber and thrust into a storm of shadow and light. I stood in darkness, yet I sensed something enormous beyond the void, something vast, ancient, watching. A whisper drifted through my mind. Penitent, I spun, searching for its source, but the darkness revealed nothing. Cold air brushed against my skin. Another whisper. Penitent. Multiple voices now, overlapping, hollow. Shapes emerged from the void silhouettes of robed figures, kneeling, heads bowed. The penitents, but not as I had seen them. These were distorted, elongated, their forms blurred at the edges as though bleeding into the darkness. They lifted their heads, their eyes glowed with ghostly light. You walked among the shadows, they murmured. You saw the signs, you failed the duty. Their voices scraped like metal across stone. You stand before the threshold of the penitent path, the path where identity dies. I stumbled backward, but the void offered no ground to retreat upon. The shadows closed in. A towering figure emerged behind them, a humanoid shape with no face, only a blank void where features should be. It radiated command, authority, judgment. The Inquisition does not forgive, it intoned, but it repurposes. The shadows surged toward me. I screamed, and the world snapped back. I collapsed on the stone floor of the chamber, gasping for breath. Sweat soaked my clothes. My limbs trembled violently. The rune circle flickered, then dimmed. The interrogator watched me with cold scrutiny. You saw the path, he said. You felt its pull. This is what awaits those deemed unfit for execution, yet unworthy of trust. A life of silence, a life of watching, a life of service without name. I shook my head. No, that's not me. I didn't choose. Many do not choose their fate, he said, but they walk it nonetheless. He approached me slowly. You still have one chance, one final opportunity to prove that your fate lies elsewhere. I looked up at him. How? By revealing what remains hidden, he said. There is more. There is always more. But I've told you everything. He raised a hand, silencing me. You told us what you remembered. Now you must tell us what you refuse to remember. His gaze hardened. We know the heretic returned to the hidden door. We know they met the foreman. We know others were involved. But there is someone else. Someone whose presence you have neglected to mention. My breath hitched. A figure flashed in my mind, a face, indistinct, masked by fog and fear, a presence I had sensed but dismissed. Someone who had been near me at the docks. Someone who spoke to the foreman when I wasn't listening closely. Someone I had seen on the night the hidden panel opened. A realization struck me like a blow to the chest. I knew who it was. The interrogator leaned forward. "Speak." The walls felt as though they were closing in. The penitent seemed to lean toward me. The candles flickered violently. "Who is the hidden witness?" he demanded. My voice finally cracked. I know them." The interrogator exhaled softly. "Then the final stage begins." He signaled the acolytes. The armored figure stepped aside. The penitent hall darkened, and I realized, with chilling clarity, that whatever came next would determine not only my fate, but the fate of the unknown figure whose shadow had intertwined with mine. The Inquisition had found the thread. Now they would follow it, no matter where it led. The descent into the lower vaults of the Inquisition was unlike anything I had endured before. Each step downward felt as though the air thickened around me, pressed tighter against my lungs, weighed heavier upon my limbs. The acolytes moved in silent formation, their footfalls absorbed by the oppressive stillness. The armored figure remained behind us this time, as if what awaited below was meant only for those who would witness, not protect. The interrogator led the way, his staff tapping against the stone floor with a rhythm that felt too intentional to be simple movement. Each impact echoed like a judgment pronounced upon the guilty. The corridor wound deeper until even the torchlight appeared reluctant to follow. The stone was darker here, stained with centuries of seepage and smoke. Symbols etched into the walls glimmered faintly as we passed, as though layers of ancient runes awakened with our presence. The air smelled of cold iron and the faint trace of burned incense that had long since drifted into memory. We arrived at a chamber whose door was forged entirely of black metal, smooth as glass yet etched with scars that no weapon I recognized could have made. The interrogator placed his palm against the sigil at its center. A low thrum pulsed outward, followed by a wave of pressure that forced me to grit my teeth to withstand it. The door slid open without noise, revealing a space lit only by the dull glow of suspended lumen orbs. Inside stood a solitary chair, not a device of overt pain, but one designed for restraint and focus. Its surface gleamed with a cold sheen, as though polished by the sweat of countless unwilling occupants. Metal clasps curled across its arms and frame like skeletal fingers, waiting. "Sit," the interrogator said. My legs obeyed even as my mind screamed. The acolytes fastened the restraints with swift precision. The clasps bit into my wrists and ankles, ensuring absolute stillness. The interrogator paced around the chair, observing me with an expression that carried neither satisfaction nor malice, simply inevitability. "You remembered the shadowed witness," he said. "But now, you must relive the moment in full. Not the half-memory your mind clung to, nor the frightened blur you offered us earlier. The truth, unfiltered, unshielded, unwarped by fear." He lifted the staff. The claw-like mechanism at its tip opened with a faint hiss, releasing a cluster of crystalline needles that glowed with a pale, cold light. They hung suspended, circling the staff like orbiting fragments of glass. "This device," he continued, "approaches deeper layers of memory than the mind refiner. It touches the subconscious, the parts of the self that even terror cannot bury. It will not harm you, not directly, but the truth might." With a flick of his wrist, the needles drifted toward me. They entered my skull without piercing flesh. A cold numbness spread through my head, followed by a sensation like layers of thought peeling away, exposing raw awareness beneath. My vision blurred, then sharpened into clarity so intense it made everything appear carved from stark white flame. "Focus," he said, though his voice now came from far away. "Follow the memory. Follow the moment you have resisted." The room dissolved. The metallic smell of the manufactorum docks filled my lungs. The distant banging of machinery reverberated through the air. The glow of lumen strips flickered above me. My younger self stood by the loading cranes, clutching the dented data slate I had used to record inventory. I watched the scene unfold as though hovering just behind my own body, powerless yet present. The hidden panel slid open. The foreman stepped into view, hunched, sweating, glancing over his shoulder with frantic paranoia. And then the other figure appeared. I felt a chill. The memory sharpened. A woman. She wore the robes of a lower-level scribe, simple, unadorned, but her stance betrayed her. Too steady, too intentional. Her hands, clasped behind her back, held no data slate, no parchment. Instead, they concealed a small device wrapped in a scrap of cloth. I leaned closer, my mind pulled by the depth of the memory. Her voice was low, urgent. "You're late," she said. "They've already begun tracing the missing shipment. If they connect it to you, I know," the foreman hissed. "You told me it would be simple, a single crate, just one." "You're a fool if you think one is ever enough," she replied. "But it doesn't matter. The heretic is waiting. You must deliver it now." The foreman trembled. "The crate is marked. If anyone sees me, they won't," she said. "Because you'll walk through the maintenance corridor. It's unmonitored at this hour." Then she shifted slightly, and my younger self, busy recording the shipment numbers, turned unknowingly toward her. Her head lifted, her gaze met mine. My breath caught as the memory froze in place, every detail illuminated with unnatural clarity. Her eyes were sharp, controlled, calculating, but behind that precision was something colder, a sense of purpose stripped of hesitation. The interrogator's voice drifted through the memory. "Now speak her name." The memory resumed. The foreman whispered desperately, "Scribe Lysa, are you sure this will work?" Her face tightened. "Do not use my name down here," she snapped. "Even the walls have ears." The memory wavered. The chamber's walls flickered into existence around me. The suspended needles pulsed with cold light. My breath came in ragged gasps. The interrogator stepped closer. "Now you see why we asked," he said. "You witnessed a seditious exchange. You heard the name, and you chose silence." "I didn't know what it meant," I said, though my voice cracked from strain. "I thought it was nothing, a disagreement, a mistake." "There is no such thing as nothing," he replied. "Not in the Manufactorum, not in the Imperium, not under the watch of the Inquisition." He circled the chair slowly. "Scribe Lysa Moranic vanished 2 nights after the heretic attempted to flee. No record of her movements remains. No data log shows her departure. Her quarters were stripped clean. Those who worked near her barely remembered she existed, as if she were a ghost. Yet you saw her. You heard her. You watched her orchestrate treason." He stopped in front of me. "What matters is not that you did not understand. What matters is that you did not report what you saw." The weight of his words pressed down like a stone slab. "If you had spoken sooner," he continued, "the heretic might have been intercepted before the forbidden scrap code was transmitted. The foreman might have been apprehended before the data leak. The damage might have been contained." He leaned closer. "But you did not speak." The restraint around my wrist tightened painfully, though no one touched it. The room felt colder. The lumen orbs dimmed. "You stand now at the edge of judgment," he said. "Your silence brought harm to the Imperium, and your complicity, intentional or ignorant, cannot be overlooked." Terror constricted my chest. "However," the interrogator said, "there remains a path, not absolution, not forgiveness, but purpose." He tapped the staff against the floor. A panel slid open in the wall. From it emerged a small servo skull, its optic lenses glowing with a dull red light. It drifted toward me, trailing faint wisps of incense smoke. Attached beneath it was a narrow case bearing the seal of the Inquisition. "This," the interrogator said, "is the warrant of conditional service." He opened the case. Inside rested a small metal implant, cylindrical, no longer than a finger, coated in tiny purity seals and engraved with looping runes. It glowed faintly with internal circuitry. "This neural brand," he said, "binds a penitent to the will of the Inquisition. Those who bear it serve under direct oversight. They are neither free nor imprisoned. They walk the line between both states. Their minds are monitored, their actions recorded, their loyalty enforced." A cold shiver rippled through my spine. "This is the price of your survival," he said. "A life of service, a life of observation, a life free of secrets, for you will no longer be capable of hiding them." He studied me for a long moment. "There were those among us who argued to grant you the fate of the kneeling penitents. Silence, darkness, a life of prayer and erasure. But the shadowed witness changes everything. It proves you can see what others overlook. You can track hidden intent. You can perceive what slips past those accustomed to routine." He nodded once, as though sealing a decision. "You will serve, and through service, you will repay your debt." The servo skull lowered toward me. A beam of cold light narrowed onto the base of my skull. Pain lanced through my head sharp, instantaneous, burning. The implant burrowed into place with a faint hiss. My vision blurred. A surge of energy flowed down my spine. For a moment, I felt as though I stood outside my body, observing the world with impossible clarity. Then it settled, cold, precise, permanent. The restraints released. My limbs fell slack until I forced them to steady. The interrogator stepped back. "It is done," he said. "From this moment forward, you serve the Ordo Hereticus as a conditional operative. You will be assigned to investigation cells. You will follow orders without hesitation. You will observe, you will report, and you will obey." The servo skull hovered near my shoulder, its lens locking onto me as though confirming a bond. "Your life no longer belongs to you," he said, "but it is a life nonetheless. Few are granted such mercy." He gestured for me to stand. My legs trembled, but I rose. The chamber door opened. A corridor stretched before me, long, dark, silent. "You walk a dangerous path," the interrogator said, "but a necessary one. The Imperium endures because those who fail are reshaped into tools, broken, refined, repurposed." He placed a hand on my shoulder. "Serve well, and perhaps one day you will rise from conditional status. Fail." He let the sentence fade, but the implication lingered like the scent of blood in cold air. The servo skull drifted forward, guiding me. The interrogator watched, his expression unreadable. I stepped into the corridor. My footsteps echoed, my fate sealed, my judgment delivered. And as the darkness swallowed the light behind me, I realized that the Inquisition had not spared me. It had claimed me, body, mind, purpose, forever.